Resuming debate, the honourable member for Foothills.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'll be splitting my time with my colleague from Provencher as well. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to start this off with reading a couple of quotes about response to the Liberals' new bill, C-69. In reality, it is unlikely that any major project would proceed under these new rules. It contains a good deal of political posturing and seems to lean to the side of attempting to please the most extreme critics. It puts the wants of a small number ahead what is best for the Canadian economy as a whole. That came from the research team at GMP Energy. Second quote, by diminishing independent quasi-judicial regulatory process for expert tribunals, Cabinet risks drifting further into the dangerous political shoals where science and economics are eclipsed by the darker forces of opportunism and favoritism. That is by a former National Energy Board chair and Jack Mintz, who's the president of the University of Calgary's School of Public Policy. These are very esteemed people who have lived and researched the energy sector, and they are telling what Canada is facing when it comes to these changes that Liberals have brought forward. And it strikes me a little bit how either disingenuous they're being talking about the impacts of this bill or how much they really don't understand the impacts these changes will have on the energy sector. And a good example was earlier today, the Minister of Natural Resources said that the only reason that Energy East didn't go forward is TransCanada abandoned Energy East because of the price of oil had dropped. I can be pretty sure that any company does not base a multi-billion-dollar project on what the price of oil was on Thursday.
Exactly right.
Right? They are going to be making a long-term major investment into that piece of infrastructure. The reason TransCanada walked away from Energy East is because of the changes in regulatory burdens that the Liberals had put on them. Downstream emissions. Unprecedented. No other industry in the country has to deal with those types of regulations. How can you expect a company to be putting those types of things into their decisions? The same thing is happening with Trans Mountain. And our colleagues across the way kept talking about all the wonderful pipelines they've built that are going to Tidewater. I'd just like to remind them that not one single inch of pipelines that they profess to have approved have been built. Not one inch. And I would suspect that Trans Mountain is a long way from getting a shovel in the ground. I think the Liberals are waiting for Kinder Morgan to just walk away in pure frustration. And then once again they can say, just as they did with TransCanada and Energy East, it wasn't us. It was a business decision. It was a decision they made. It was a decision they made based on Liberal ideology and regulations that make it literally impossible for a major piece of infrastructure to get built in this country. And that is certainly the case with Bill C-69, an omnibus bill that many of my colleagues have shown is more than 400 pages, and yet I would argue as a Canadian that this is a bill that will have incredibly profound impact on Canadians across the country. We are no longer on the verge of being an energy superpower that develops our natural resources under the most stringent environmental stewardship in the world. We are now becoming a non-factor because there is not a capital investor in the world under these regulations that looks at Canada as a place that is open to do business. In fact, they look at Canada as a place where they are not welcome. There is no clear line to success for an infrastructure project. What really bothers me with Bill C-69 is it opens the door for non-Canadians to have an influence on Canada's natural resource sector and our future on whatever that may be under these new regulations. As a portion of Bill C-69, it allows non-Canadians to have influence on Canadian infrastructure projects, and let's think about that for a minute. Under the previous Conservative regime, we made sure that anybody who wanted to have intervenor status on a project had a very good reason to be there. They were going to be impacted in some way by this project. But by eliminating those rules, we are now going to be opening the doors wide open for anyone to influence these decisions. This will be extreme anti-oil activists are now going to have a seat at the table. This could also be energy companies in the United States who would benefit a great deal by crippling Canada's energy sector. They're also going to have a seat at the table. So these people who are trying to negatively impact Canada's economy are going to have the same standing as those energy companies, those pipeline companies, those First Nations who want our energy sector to succeed. And who are the Liberals going to be listening to when they're making these decisions? We have seen the impact of these activists across the country, and they've been doing it kind of through subterfuge. But now they can be as not only blocking roads and highways or mining operations or drilling operations, they're going to be invited to the table to help the Liberals make these decisions. And I find that extremely disconcerting that they are going to have an active role in defining who we are as Canadians when it comes to our natural resource sector. And how is that possibly going to make this process shorter or those timelines definitive when the Minister of Climate Change and Environment is going to be not only inviting these witnesses, a countless number of witnesses, to provide testimony, but throughout the process, she has the ability, and it says so in black and white in the bill, as much as they like to deny it, that she can stop this process multiple times at every single stage, and it stops the clock. So these comments about 45 days, 185 days, 300 days, 475 days is a bunch of bunk. She can stop any process indefinitely and as many times as the minister wants. Now let's talk about another aspect of that. Time and again today, our colleagues across the floor have said this is going to be a science-based decision process. Nonsense. We're taking it out of the hands of politics. Wrong. How can they say that with a straight face when, again, in Bill C-69, it says in black and white that the Minister of Environment and Climate Change has the sole responsibility to decide if a project is in the public interest. And she alone decides if that project moves from the assessment stage on to the main study stage. Right. So how can they possibly say that this is science-based? It is not. There is political influence at every single stage. That's right. So myself as a proponent, as an investor, how can I possibly make that decision to invest billions of dollars into a project when I know one person has the decision to say if my project is worthwhile? It doesn't matter how many studies I do. It doesn't matter how much support I have from communities, First Nations, business. It doesn't matter what kind of environmental studies I do or science that's there. It comes down to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, who has been extremely vocal about her position on Canada's natural resource sector. Yeah. She wants the gas and oil and mining operations, LNG projects to absolutely cease. We don't want those things. We want to be a non-carbon-based economy, despite the demand for oil and gas increasing over the next 50 to 100 years. That oil is coming from somewhere, but our Minister of Environment and Climate Change says as long as it doesn't come from us, and we are paying the price. And let's talk about the price that we were paying before this bill has even been through legislation. More than $50 billion in capital has left Canada. Hundreds of thousands of energy jobs have been lost. But let's put that into a perspective I think every Canadian can understand. We're talking about the price of oil a few minutes ago. $60 a barrel, maybe around 57. That's West Texas Intermediate. Canadian crude is being sold at half that, $30. As a result of that, we sell our oil to the United States because we don't have international market access, because pipelines aren't being built, and they will never be built under this legislation. Yep. But as a result of that, the United States buys our oil, sells it at a premium. That is a hospital being built every week, a school every day, being built in the United States instead of Canada, and we are subsidizing it because of these decisions of the Liberal government. It is absolutely wrong. We'll fight it every single way.